Geneva, another American president might have been frustrated, or even angry. Moments after spending more than 3 hours on Wednesday across a table from President Biden at their first summit, President Vladimir V Putin of Russia delivered his usual list of grievances to reporters. He denied Russian culpability for cyberattacks targeting U.S. interests, accusing the United States of carrying out more. He said America's human rights record was worse than his country's. And he accused the Biden government of a military buildup near Ukraine. It was vintage Putin, and it seemed to reinforce the idea that the high-profile diplomatic exchange on the banks of Lake Geneva had done little to change a relationship that has deteriorated for years. But if Mr. Biden was annoyed by his counterpart's performance, there was no sign of it during his own subsequent news conference, or at a later conversation with reporters under the wing of Air Force One before he left Switzerland to conclude his 8-day, 3-country diplomatic tour of Europe. Mr. Biden's response to his Russian adversary underscored a persistent feature of his presidency: a stubborn optimism that critics say borders on worrisome naïveté and that allies insist is an essential ingredient to making progress. The country has put a different face on where we've been and where we're going, and I feel good about it, Mr. Biden said before boarding his plane, chiding the news media for being too skeptical. I mean, look, guys, I'm going to drive you all crazy because I know you want me to always put a negative thrust on things. The important thing, he said, is to put on an optimistic front and optimistic face while remaining realistic about the prospects for real change over the long run. If you were in my position, would you say, well, I don't think, man, anything is going to happen. This is going to be really rough. I think it's going to really be bad. Mr. Biden asked the reporters. You'd guarantee nothing happens. Mr. Biden's life has been filled with sorrow and disappointment, including the deaths of his wife and daughter as a young senator and the loss of his son Beau to cancer just as the older Mr. Biden was contemplating a run for the presidency. But despite the tragedies, much of his public life has been marked by a determination to see the positive where others don't. To listen to Mr. Biden at his news conference, one could easily conclude that the meeting with Mr. Putin had been a resounding success. The president noted an agreement with Russia to begin work on a new arms control agreement. The trick, he said, is to figure out what his adversary's interests are. In Mr. Putin's case, he wants legitimacy, standing in the world stage, Mr. Biden said. They desperately want to be relevant. That kind of unrestrained positivity has already opened him to the charge that he's naive, unwilling to see the reality staring at him across the table.